Welcome back to the BTS Happy Hour podcast. I'm your host, Andrea. With me to discuss this week's stories is Morgan.
Hey, what's up?
South Korea stands to lose billions from making K-pop superstars BTS do military service. So this article starts out, fans of K-pop band BTS were left heartbroken on Monday when it was announced the group's members were set to serve in the South Korean military, meaning no new tours or music for several years. So before we get into the rest of this, Morgan, what was your reaction when the enlistment news was announced?
Well, I was surprised. I guess I was wrong. I thought they would clear this up at some point. I mean, there was plenty of energy behind getting them some kind of exemption.
Yeah.
But it just didn't come to pass. There were enough people in the public who are against this. I don't know. I don't have my finger on the pulse for the South Korean public, but it seems stupid to be against this. It just seems like they're shooting themselves in the foot. But maybe it's the principle of the matter, right?
Yeah. Probably us in this podcast thought that they would work it out eventually because of how the government kept talking about it. So maybe maybe it was just all talk. Like they didn't really have a way to make it happen.
I think that the people who wanted to make it happen were serious. They were sincere.
Uh-huh.
But they just ran into too much resistance. And also, it was just coming time for BTS to make a decision.
Right. It kind of ran out of time at this point.
Right.
And this has been discussed for the past few years because everybody knows, okay, BTS, they're getting to the age where the older ones will have to go enlist. So there's time for them to work it out. But I guess they ran out of time, or they didn't have enough support from enough constituencies. As we know, they announced that they are going to stop applying for the delay. And so that means Jin's supposed to enlist pretty soon. And this article came out that says that the Hyundai Research Institute said BTS was contributing more than $3.6 billion to the South Korean economy every year. And they also said that BTS brought in 1 in every 13 tourists who visited South Korea in 2017 and generated $1.1 billion from consumer goods like merch and cosmetics in a single year. And analysts projected between 2014 and 2023, BTS would have contributed $29 trillion to the South Korean economy. So it's like, wow, trillions?
I have a problem with that figure. It's clearly not correct.
That sounds very high.
I think that this is just an example of how the quality of employee at Yahoo News is really dipped over the years. I think they confused it with Korean won.
Oh, yeah, that's true.
Because you understand that 29 trillion is the U.S. GDP per year.
Of the United States.
Gross domestic product of the United States is about 30 trillion. Don't quote me on this, but it's about that.
Those dollars.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
The gross domestic product of China is around 15, 17. It's growing, but if you look at the numbers, it makes sense if it's Korean won, because the exchange is like 0.007 Korean won. And so basically it means that it's only about 20 billion over the next 10 years.
Right.
That's not a small number. I say only.
Yeah, won is like the next denomination, like add a zero.
So they
to
were
the end.
sort of mixing up dollars and won in this same article and just not being clear about it. But I can assure you that they wouldn't produce $29 trillion of economy of anything over the next 10 years. That's quite ridiculous.
Right.
It's 20 billion,
right,
which is a lot of money.
Yeah, I mean, we knew they had a big impact.
And it makes sense when you think that, okay, this year they account for 3 billion or so.
Mm-hmm.
So that's about 2 billion per year, 3 billion this year. You would assume it'd be declining over the next 9 years. That makes sense. But it's most certainly not 29 trillion.
Right. I mean, trillion won, probably.
Trillion won, yeah.
Yeah.
Because that means about $20 billion.
Right. So, given the financial hit that the country is going to take, do you think that they should have tried harder to...
Of course they should have tried. This is ridiculous. whatever principled stand that people wanted to take about enlistment, it's not worth $3 billion a year to your economy.
Yeah, that's why I thought, okay, they really have to come to a plan, because why would you want your country to lose a lot of money when it's preventable?
It's just stupid. I don't even understand. Let me just put it this way. The Korean GDP is 1.8 trillion a year, or was last year.
Mm-hmm.
So BTS is 3 billion of this. I know that's like seems like a small percentage, but it's still pretty significant, okay? Just trust me. It's pretty significant.
Yeah, I mean, they have entire industries, is like
Yeah.
electronics and cars and things.
I don't understand. And all you had to do is just give these 7 guys an exemption.
Right, like what's the big deal about that?
I can assure you that other laws have been bent to favor industries in Korea for less than $3 billion a year.
Mm-hmm.
I can assure you of that. It happens in the U.S. too.
Yeah, I mean, and he brought up like the public sentiment on it, but I feel like I saw polls where like most people were okay with it. If they got an exemption, they would have been like, oh, okay, that's fine, BTS, because of, these monetary reasons.
But maybe it's too high profile, and there was just too much backlash.
Yeah, and then there was I saw an editorial printed about this. They kind of summarized like everything that happened and kind of praised BTS for bringing all the speculation to an end by they're the ones that made the decision, not the government or not whoever. So they think, okay, that's showing leadership. And then they also mentioned how, like, okay, BTS was asked to do all these things with President Moon, like UN things, and they were asked to do this whole Busan concert that they just did that's supposed to help, solely for the benefit of helping South Korea get this World Expo. And it's like, okay, they did all that just for the country's benefit, but then the country didn't really, like, give them anything, any kind of thanks or whatever in return. Not that they had to, like, get an exemption, but, like, some consideration maybe.
In fairness, I do think that there are people who really wanted to make this happen, but we just don't know the specifics of the political fallback in Korea. This is clearly a hot button issue for them,
Mm-hmm.
and maybe it's just something you can't touch. Although I just don't understand why it's such a hot button. Other people have gotten exemptions.
Yeah, like many.
If
like
nobody
athletes.
ever got an exemption, then I would understand. But other people, like, if you win an Olympic gold medal, you get an exemption.
Right, and in certain sports, and then like certain classical musicians, like if you are like award winning. So yeah, I don't. But then they said, oh, K-pop doesn't count as one of those things that they award.
But why? Why? No one can articulate a good reason why. Just because it hasn't in the past doesn't mean it shouldn't in the future. Anyway.
Yeah, I do think that it points out how they probably need to clarify what constitutes an exemption, because it needs to be updated more. But then it's like, okay, if they were going to change it, then why wouldn't they have changed it for BTS? That's like the biggest example of, if it should be changed, then that should be the impetus to change it. But they didn't, so I guess
you should just be happy that it's really only 18 months, right?
Yeah, for if they picked the army, but
Yeah.
the other ones could be longer.
Well, why would they pick the longer ones? Of course they would pick the shortest one. Just for fun? No.
Well, it's up to the members, I guess.
Well, clearly they're going to confer with each other.
Yeah. Well, some people are already joking on like social media that they think like Jungkook, he's gonna pick whatever's the hardest one, like the most challenging one.
He's going to pick what the label tells him to pick.
They did say that they were like trusting Hive with like the decisions on this, so
They'll pick the shortest one. It's only going to be 18 months. I know that people are sad about this, but I'll give you an example. And maybe this is not a great example because I have not been paying super close attention to K-pop. Just sort of in and out. But when Winner went to do their enlistment, I thought, oh, too bad. They're going to be at enlistment for a while. And then before I knew it, they were out of it. I didn't even feel like I missed them. It just felt like, oh, they're out of it already? Time flies.
right. It did seem like that.
Yeah. And they can have stuff in the pipeline that's released. They just can't do concerts.
Right.
Certainly they can have solo stuff that's released. It'll tide you over. And those 18 months, it will only be like a year hiatus. Is that so bad? That's very, very short in the grand scheme of things.
Yeah. And I think now was probably a good time to announce it because like earlier in June when they said, okay, we're taking a group break, that kind of prepared everybody for this time that's coming. So now we're kind of used to like, oh, the group isn't really doing group stuff right now. So we're already kind of used to the season where it's like just solo things, if anything. So then during a press briefing on October 18th, a representative of South Korea's Ministry of Defense made a comment about BTS's decision to carry out their military service beginning in late October. And he said, if it is for public service to the nation or for national events or performances which benefit the nation, BTS will be given the opportunity to participate in performances and activities should they wish. And he said this is already available to some enlisted soldiers. So I guess, I don't know why they needed to mention that. I think we know sometimes that like idols that are in the military, they perform for, certain stages that have to do with like military presentations or whatever. So I guess maybe they felt like, well, in case you're like sad about BTS enlisting, you might still see them perform together for like a national performance.
Right.
I guess that's why that was mentioned. But most people seem to be aware of that. Like they're not gonna disappear.
Well,
for
of
18
course,
months.
of course, they can perform for the government.
Yeah.
That's kind of crappy. Of course, they can perform for the government. They'll let them perform. I just want to talk about something about how I've gone from this podcast for a while, and I've also been gone from K-pop. Although I still listen to it, it's still great. Music's still great. Don't at me. Music's still great. I'm not anti-K-pop or anything, but like a couple interesting things have happened since I've been not paying attention, and now I'm sort of paying attention. Number one, and this is totally unrelated, so excuse me for that. I noticed that Chair Young from ITZY got a nose job. That's so cool. I didn't think she was a very attractive woman before, but now she's attractive to me.
Right. That was always like the fans' criticism of her. Like,
I didn't agree with fans bragging on her either. I mean, if you don't find her attractive, then just move on. There's plenty of other attractive members.
I did think that was kind of mean.
Just look at Yuna or something. Yeah, just move on. Move to the attractive members. That's fine. But now she's also one of the attractive members. She just a few little changes with her nose.
Yeah, I did.
Let that be a lesson. Get a nose job if you have the money.
I did notice that, like, from, I guess, ITZY's latest release. Is that when that happened? I'm not quite sure, though.
Right. So now she's also one of the it wasn't like she was unattractive. I don't want to say that, but she's kind of on the same level now.
Right. Like the 5 ITZY girls are all kind of the same level now.
And also Ryujin lost a lot of weight. And even though Americans think she lost too much weight, from what I could see from comments, they're like, oh my God, she's too thin. No, she's absolutely awesome now. I think she's looked a little chunky to me before, I'll be honest with you. Not by American standards, of course. By American standards, she was always thin. Mm-hmm. But we're talking about K-pop standards here, guys. You have to judge people in the context, just like you can't judge Thomas Jefferson for having slaves. You can't judge Ryujin's weight against what Americans think is thin. By American standards, everybody in K-pop is thin. But this is not the standard that they're judged by because they're in K-pop and you're not. You're in America. They're just different standards. Mm-hmm. Without me insulting you in, whatever state that has a really high BMI. Not trying to insult you. I'm just saying K-pop has a different standard. And by that standard, she wasn't super thin. But now she is, and she looks great.
Her features seem to have gotten...
They really pop now.
A lot sharper.
Right. So I just feel like ITZY has sort of refined their look, and they're at their peak level now. Mm-hmm. They're coming to the United States, but we're not going to go see that concert because it's far. No, it's not far. It's inconvenient for various reasons.
Right. But I would see them if they were performing nearby and at a convenient time.
Yes, of course. I think ITZY's awesome.
Well, we were trying to see twice, but that was like impossible to get tickets.
I want to see Blackpink too, but I'll be honest with you. The resale prices are insane. The resale prices are higher than BTS at this point.
Yeah.
I was looking at Blackpink and it was like $400 for the cheapest seat. And I'm not going to act like I'm poor or something, but it's not worth it to me. It's just like for the cheapest seat, $400.
Yeah.
It's just not worth it for me.
Yeah, that's crazy. I don't know why they can't just play bigger venues.
And another thing is Blackpink, and I'm a Blackpink fan, so I'm not trying to rag on them, but you can tell that their live performance is not that awesome. It's kind of lackluster. A lot of the energy you see when you watch them on YouTube, it's from the camera work.
Mm-hmm.
But their actual dancing and stuff, it's you know, it leaves quite a bit to be desired.
Yeah, there's a big difference between going to see like BTS performance and getting spoiled by that, and then other K-pop
male groups perform quite a bit better, and you know, because they're just physically more capable of doing it.
Right. They push themselves.
This is not a criticism of Blackpink, but it doesn't really add anything to see it live, is what I'm saying. Especially from their cheap seats, I can't even see them.
Yeah. Well,
and I have bad vision too.
I think their performance level is kind of typical of like other like girl groups. It's the similar thing.
And especially these days when so many of the dances, the choreography of the dance, it starts from a place of making it reproducible and viral.
Yeah.
They want to create dances that people can do on TikTok.
Mm-hmm.
But those aren't the amazing dances that you see in early BTS or even current BTS, right?
Right.
Like those are big group dances that include a lot of movement, but that's not a TikTok dance. TikTok has actually probably been had a very negative impact on K-pop as far as I can tell, because a lot of those dances are very upper body focus and you stand in one place. And that could look good on TikTok, sure, but does that look good when I'm in the like upper levels of a stadium looking down on you? No, it doesn't look good. It doesn't look interesting at all.
Right. It doesn't.
No. So I'm not going to pay $400 to see them. I think that I would pay $200 for a cheap seat to see them. But that's about my limit.
Yeah. The whole TikTok challenge thing, I really hate it now. And I think it started with Zico. Remember he did the Any Song challenge, and then that got
It would have happened even
viral.
Regardless. No, it would have happened regardless.
Okay.
Don't blame it on him.
Don't blame Zico.
No. It would have made its way and influenced K-pop.
Yeah. Because they just want to use every social media to, go viral, and can't really blame people for that. It's like, if that worked, then let's try that.
Correct.
So yeah, BTS, once they enlist, this person said that maybe they can do performances for the government.
Wonderful, of course. Come give us some free labor.
Yeah. It's like you can take a break from your activities to just...
You know what they should do? They should just identify as women. I'm not eligible for the draft or military service because I'm female.
Right.
Korea doesn't accept that bullshit, though, so
it wouldn't
work. No.
Yeah.
Otherwise, lots of people would do it.
Right.
I identify as a woman for the next 13 years or whatever until I'm not eligible for the service.
Right.
See, if they were more progressive and enlightened like us, then this wouldn't have even been a problem.
Yeah, someone would have tried that by now.
Unfortunately, the woke American fans would have to refer to BTS by the new pronouns. Right?
Yeah.
You have to say she did this or whatever.
So the same day that HYBE announced BTS's military service plans, they also sent a letter to shareholders stating that it remains possible for the company to achieve continued growth while BTS serves. And they said that BTS's transition to military service is not a sudden event. Every effort has been made to establish company-wide measures to dispel market concerns that may arise from the announcement of these plans. So they're trying to ensure that everybody is calm and doesn't like start immediately selling off their shares.
Correct.
But I do think they have done a lot in the past few years to try to mitigate.
Well, do you know what happened to the share price?
I think it dropped anyway.
Of course.
Like,
okay.
At least
a lot?
No, like just with the news.
What's some?
I don't know the numbers.
Mm.
But it's like they haven't really enlisted yet. So I don't know, maybe there's more effects going to happen later, once they actually start leaving. But I do think Hybe has done a lot. That since that time, the past few years, they bought those other labels and they combined with the Scooter Braun's company. So they kind of have like other streams coming in. Like I think Justin Bieber and Ariana Grande money goes to Hybe.
Yeah,
technically now.
They own them.
Yeah, and then they said they're gonna debut all these other new groups, and then have all these plans.
But the unavoidable fact it will affect them.
Well, even if it's not group music, because they've saved up some, and they're going to release later. But then they also going to have all these solo albums. So
it will affect them, but just for a year.
Yeah, it'll rebound. It'll be like the economy, right?
And there's also the question of if the majority of the shareholders and the public, if they already felt that this was coming, then it was already sort of priced into the stock price.
Right, that's true.
Like it just depends on the perception of the people in the market. If they already just assume that, BTS will probably serve soon, it would have been priced into the stock market price of Hybe.
Mm-hmm.
So it's probably priced in, and like you said, they have other avenues. You're right. If Justin Bieber would release an album, that's not fair. He does release music.
Mm-hmm.
So does Ariana Grande.
Yeah, they have stuff going on,
and they have other groups. So I don't think it would have a gigantic impact.
Yeah, I mean they've done everything they could do. It's not like they're just sitting there and like.
They've been preparing for this day.
Yeah.
Yeah, for at least 3-4 years.
So yeah, if I had Hybe shares, I'd feel okay about it. I wouldn't
sell it today.
No.
Because
it's definitely going to go up. Like you want to have the shares.
I wouldn't say definitely. That's not financial advice.
Well, once they come back, it's supposed to be 2025. Probably the shares will go up at that point, right?
I'm involved in a lot of financial spaces, and even though this is not a thing that actually covers your ass, it's still important to always say this is not financial advice. Because people get, like, if you offer advice and people construe it as financial, you could get sued if you're not qualified to offer financial advice. Let's just say this is not financial advice. Don't go buy stocks based on anything we say.
Right. I'm
Boys
just saying
and girls,
what
okay?
I would or wouldn't do.
You would hold it, but that's just an opinion. It's not financial advice. I personally wouldn't hold it, but that's just because of the direction of the markets over the next few years. It has nothing to do with Hybe specifically.
Right. I mean, it's tough to hold any kind of stocks in anything right now.
It is, and I haven't been. I've had a ton of money just sitting in cash. We won't get into that.
Like even companies that are stable, it's like they're
stable and going down.
Yeah, they're like even if you had a bunch of Amazon stock, it's like.
Oh yeah.
Still, it's just.
You've been killed over the past year. It's okay.
Yeah.
We won't. This is not a financial podcast. We're not getting into that.
It's a tough economy right now. So, as we know, Hybe said that they were trying to decrease dependency on BTS and diversify its business. And now that BTS has said that they are going to go enlist, there's this other story that came up, which kind of seems to contradict all of this, success that Hybe has had with like all their plans. There's some fans, they think that Hybe is sabotaging BTS's solo albums. So because of the way Hybe has managed the recent solo releases, fans think that Hybe, for some reason, is sabotaging the solo activities.
Why?
So J-Hope's album earlier this year, Jack in the Box, he didn't have a physical album because I guess they wanted to make it more environmentally friendly. So it was only like a digital release, but it still had photo cards, and I think that's probably the main point of an album release. So I think they're like, okay, well, as long as we have photo cards, that's fine. And then Hybe said later they would release a limited edition vinyl, which will be released in December. And then Jin announced his first single, The Astronaut, and it will have a physical copy of the album, but it'll be released overseas at a later date. And so the fans are saying that since the album sales numbers are going to be affected because you don't have all of the versions available right at the beginning, that's going to affect, like, oh, it's not going to look like they sold that many because okay, the vinyl is available later, and then Jin's release is available later overseas. That, oh, Hybe's doing this on purpose, so that will make the numbers look worse for the solo release, because they want it to look like, okay, it's only successful when it's the whole group. But it's like, why would Hybe bother to do all that?
It doesn't make sense to me.
Yeah, this theory
does it make sense to you?
Does not make sense to me. They think that, like, the one fan said, I feel like Hybe is doing this on purpose to show that they're depending less on BTS. So if they have solo releases and that are not that successful, it's like, oh, well, that's fine. We have other artists that are doing well.
Yeah. That does not make sense to me at all. Why would they try to sabotage their own group?
Hybe would be damaging themselves if they did that. And I think the reasons that people gave they don't indicate some kind of like intentional sabotage, but like the vinyl copies of J-Hope's album that are available later, like I've heard that it's very difficult to get vinyl produced because there's only so many manufacturers of that, so you have to like slot it in. It's like, okay, well, this artist is already booked at the factory or whatever for this month or whatever, so it's like it's very limited. So the fact that it's later, it's like, okay, they just didn't get an early enough time slot to get their vinyl stuff produced. So a lot of this is like supply chain related, or it's just like, okay, the overseas copies of Jin's album are later. Well, maybe they decided that's a better month for selling. It's like you don't know that it's like, oh, we're trying to make Jin look bad. We're trying to make J-Hope look bad.
Why in the world would they try to make them look bad?
Yeah, they would have no reason to do that. So I think this is just like a fan theory that just makes no sense. And it's like fans don't know what's involved in running a record label. There's a lot of moving parts to this, and just because it's like, oh, your fave is involved, that doesn't mean you're an expert on anything.
No, this holds no water for me. I feel like I don't want to address it because it makes zero sense.
Yeah.
If the artist even felt for a moment that they were trying to sabotage them, that would be the end of the relationship. For what benefit? I don't understand. I can understand. I'm not even saying that companies never screw over people because it's in their self-interest. Of course they do. But I don't understand the self-interest here.
Yeah. And I heard J-Hope, he didn't want a physical album, so that's why I didn't have one. Like, he was trying to be more progressive and stuff, and not... I think that's a good idea. Like, don't have everybody dependent on CDs and stuff, because no one plays the CDs anyway. They want the photo cards.
Yeah, but people like buying the CDs in K-pop.
Yeah, and they put it on a shelf, and then it's just a souvenir, basically.
Basically, I think you should just sell other types of souvenirs that are more useful, like a shirt.
Yeah, I mean, I think you get all this other stuff, but it's like you're really buying that other stuff. No, this theory is
dumb.
This is just fans with a crazy theory that are paranoid.
So, anyway, to wrap up BTS, it's been a long time since I've talked about BTS, but I'll talk about it here. First of all, I'm very sorry. I was wrong. I thought they would get an exemption. I sincerely thought that, but I don't have my finger on the pulse of the political winds in Korea, and I think that's what undid them at the end of the day. It would have been nice if they got it, of course, but they didn't. But on the other hand, if there's a bright side, and just trying to find a silver lining here, which I'm sure, it's only going to be 18 months or so, but I'm sure that that's small comfort for a lot of BTS fans because they still feel crushed by this, right? They still feel like, oh, they're going to lose a lot. And the 18 months will go by very slowly. The one thing I would say to you is perhaps there is this silver lining. You maybe I'm just throwing it out there. I don't know this for sure or anything like that, but this is just me spitballing. Try to look at it like this. There was once this musical group, of some renown. They were called the Beatles, okay? And they were very popular back in the 60s to 1970. They put out music almost continuously, but they had a sort of a small, I don't even want to call it a gap because it doesn't seem like it was a gap. But there was a distinct, and you listen to Beatles, so you know this. There was a distinct first part of the Beatles' life where they were very just rock and roll pop music. Mm-hmm. And then they very quickly transitioned to making music that was more current of the time. The way I would describe it is they became dirty hippies. So that was the kind of music that I didn't like. Although, admittedly, they made some great songs at that time. Mm-hmm. But I didn't like their dirty hippie music because I don't like dirty hippies. Sue me, okay? But a lot of people loved that. There's a distinct first half of their career and a distinct second half.
Yeah.
And some people love the second half. It was more artistic, more daring, whatever you want to call it. The first half was more just pop music, just catchy, popular songs. And they matured and they branched out into doing something else. And still most people loved it. I don't think they lost fans. I wasn't there. I wasn't alive. But I don't believe they lost any fans. It was just a different thing, an evolution to something else that was more mature, more daring, more experimental. Perhaps BTS is going to do that when they come back. So perhaps if you're going to take any positive from this, 18 months is quite a bit of time for them to sort of reflect on where they're at and where they're going musically and what they want to do. And at this point, they're certainly powerful enough and they have the leverage to do whatever they want musically. They don't have to listen to hype necessarily. Mm-hmm. You might be getting a totally different kind of BTS when they get back. That might scare you, but at the same time, it could be awesome. It could be something that you didn't even think you wanted, but after you hear it, you'll think it's the best thing ever. That's the way I believe it was for a lot of fans of the Beatles. Perhaps they wanted them to just be the same exact type group all the way through for their 10 years of existence. But at some point they transitioned. I would say, where would you say? Like around when they released Sgt. Pepper's probably is when they transitioned to this different form of the dirty hippie era, as I like to call it. A lot of people love that era, though. That's their favorite era. That's what they think when they think of the Beatles. When I think of the Beatles, I think of the cool rock music, pop stuff, the Ed Sullivan Show Beatles.
Like Hard Day's Night.
Yeah, Ed Sullivan
Black
Beatles.
and White.
But other people like the dirty hippie Beatles.
Right.
That's fine. That's a matter of taste.
Where they're playing on the roof and they have long hair and they're crossing Abbey Road.
Abbey Road Beatles is perfect. Sgt. Pepper, Abbey Road, that's a favorite version for a lot of people.
Right.
When they wore, a lot of different colors. I liked it when they all wore black suits. Okay, that's an easy delineation. There's that form of Beatles where they all wore black suits and they just played rock music, pop music. And there's a more avant-garde side. Perhaps you'll get an evolution of BTS. And I think if they do evolve after this hiatus, I think that would be good for them long term. Because I know you love the pop, what they've been producing so far. And I know it's not the same, like they've had evolutions already, right? They haven't been producing the same type of music. But they could even mature beyond that and give you a different side of them. And I think in the end that helps their longevity. If you want to be a fan of them as you grow older, I know a lot of people who are fans of them are young. A lot are not. But if you're a young fan and as you mature, your music taste may change as well. And so this will make it more sustainable for you to continue being a BTS fan. And if you're an old fan, this may still make it sustainable because they just offer different kinds of music over their lifetime, right? It doesn't get stale, essentially.
Yeah.
And so perhaps this break, this military service break, will allow them to hit their next evolution. You might get something a lot different. Not better or worse, but different. Or maybe you think it's better or worse, but they are an old group at this point. How old are they? 8 years? 9? Something like that.
It started in 2013.
They're 9 years old. The Beatles only lasted 10 years, just so you know. They lasted 10 years.
Right.
So next year, BTS will have outlived the Beatles. Just think about that for a second. But the Beatles went through these evolutions, and I think they were better off for it. I think that if they continue playing the same music, if they were playing the same music in 1969 that they were playing in 1961, I think they would not have the same place in history that they do now. Even though I still, and I stand by this, I dislike the dirty hippie era of the Beatles, I have to admit that evolution helped them as far as their stature in history, about what they have to offer. They change with the times. They evolve with it. Or they even pushed the genre in directions just based on the weight of what they did.
Mm-hmm.
You might see BTS do that. You might see them just push K-pop in different directions. They are the biggest act, obviously. So what they do after this hiatus may push it in a different direction. I think what the Beatles did after Sgt. Pepper's did push rock music in a different direction. How could it not? Because they were the biggest act.
Yeah.
Now they disbanded in 1970, so we couldn't really see the full evolution of all that, but it gives you an idea of, I don't know, it just think about that as a possibility of something you can look forward to as far as what's the silver lining here. You might get something new and awesome because they had this certain amount of time to reflect, to evolve. When you're just stuck in this rut, rut is a good word, rut of constantly producing videos, producing music, you probably just keep doing the same thing.
Yeah,
that's the tendency.
That's like what RM was saying. Like, it's hard to be more creative when you gotta keep having output.
Right. But when you have this hiatus of maybe 18 months, you might see them evolve. And that could really push not just them, but K-pop in general into a new place. So I'm actually excited to see what they will do after something like this. And maybe they'll just keep doing the same sort of stuff. But that wouldn't be so bad either, because I'm sure many people love the same sort of stuff.
Mm-hmm. Well, and also in these 18 months or 2 years, they're going to be working on their solo albums, so they'll be trying a lot of different things individually. And you know how the Beatles, they broke up because some of the members were like, oh, I'm not getting enough songs on the album, or I'm not getting like my creative voice being heard. And that's kind of why they broke up, is because they didn't let them do solo stuff until after.
But George Harrison sucks.
Well, yeah.
He had one good song in the 80s, okay? What was that song?
Something?
I Got My Mind Set on You.
Oh, I thought you were going to say Something. People like that one. No, wait, that's a Beatles song. Never mind.
It's a Beatles song. The only George Harrison song I know is I Got My Mind Set on You. So what did he have to offer? And of course, Ringo Starr is total garbage.
He's just a personality.
So which person didn't feel creatively fulfilled? Because Paul McCartney and John Lennon both wrote tons of songs.
Right. Well, and then they were
so it was neither of them.
They were like at odds with each other too, because they're like, stop.
No, the real reason they broke up is we all know is because of Yoko Ono. That's the real reason. Just look it up if you guys. I know this is ancient history to most people listening, but what happened was there was a woman came between all of them. That's how I remember. John Lennon started dating a crazy woman.
And then he started having like very weird music. Like
Yeah, he wanted to, like beat on drums and scream into the mic and things like that.
Yoko Ono, don't listen to her music. It's extremely terrible.
And in fact, whenever somebody says you're like a Yoko Ono, that's what they mean. They mean you're like a crazy woman who's come to break up a good thing. She's still viewed very negatively.
Right.
And this is despite the fact that in hindsight, we know more things about John. Like John Lennon was a wife beater and things like that. So opinion has soured on him as well. But opinion has not been rehabilitated for Yoko Ono. People still view her as a harpy, a poison.
She ruined the
poisonous
Beatles.
Influence that made the Beatles break up early.
Yeah.
She will never be rehabilitated in their minds. She doesn't deserve to be. I don't think so.
But I do think the fact that they're doing solo stuff just in the middle, then they'll BTS can,
how are they doing solo stuff? They're in the military though.
Well, they're getting all their stuff ready now, and I think they're gonna release it all like throughout.
Oh, well, that's perfect. It'll be almost like they never left.
But that way, none of them can be upset that like, oh, I didn't get my creative outlet. So they're gonna avoid the Beatles problem. So that you're right, it's gonna contribute to BTS lasting longer as a group.
Well, here's the thing. I think they'll last longer as a group just because I think the Koreans are more pragmatic about the realities, the economic realities. They're stronger as a group. Mm-hmm. They'll make more money as a group. Mm-hmm. But I just feel like you have to remember, boys and girls, if you don't know the context of this, 1970, there's the Vietnam War and hippies and counterculture, and lots of people were taking really powerful drugs, and Yoko Ono was a nutcase, and people were not pragmatic and rational. They weren't thinking, well, I'll make a lot less money if I break up this group, so I probably shouldn't break up this group. No, they were thinking about a lot of things before money. Mm-hmm. They weren't being pragmatic. They weren't thinking, hey, we're a historically important music act. We probably shouldn't break up.
We make so much money together.
Right.
We should stay together.
We only release a #1 album every fucking year, which is what the Beatles did, by the way.
Right.
It's quite amazing. It's even better than BTS. I'm sorry. When you look in history, every year they released, it seems like an album that had many #1 hits.
Yeah, especially you think about they are a foreign group to the U.S.
Well, the Beatles and BTS are foreign groups.
Right, but then like BTS, they have trouble getting to the charts.
Yeah. So, yeah, they outperformed even BTS in many, many ways. But they just didn't have those priorities. They didn't care at that point. They just said, well, we've been here 10 years, and also we hate each other. I think some of them hated each other.
Yeah, I think they all hate each other by the end.
Which is impressive because there's only 4 of them. You think you could get along, 4 people. Well, we don't know that there's no BTS members that hate each other. I'm sorry to say it, but there probably are some who don't get along. There's 7 people. Right? There was that blind item that said V didn't like him.
Right.
It's possible.
Yeah, we don't know behind the scenes. Like, what's
we don't know.
really going on.
Maybe he doesn't like him. I'm not trying to stir up anything, but maybe he doesn't like him.
This will be a good break then.
But he is pragmatic, unlike the Beatles, who were well into their hippie phase and drugs.
Oh, yeah. Definitely Koreans.
V will stay in the group because it makes sense to
Koreans,
stay in the group.
Asians, they're all very pragmatic.
Yeah. So that's good for if you're a fan.
Yeah. Definitely they're going to be doing the smart thing. So there was a controversy recently involving Crush. And the headline of this article says, a K-pop star didn't high-five black fans. Was it racism? So what happened was Crush, who's a South Korean rapper, R&B singer, he was performing in Seoul at a concert. And there's a point where he's like greeting fans who are up to the front rows, and he's like touching their hands or high-fiving or whatever. And then there's a point where he doesn't touch the hands of a couple of the black K-pop fans that are in the audience.
Was this in Korea?
Yes, it was in Korea.
Okay. Black people are in Korea. I know that's not
I
impossible.
guess they must have been. This
Yeah.
is in Seoul, so
Yeah. I know that's not impossible.
at
Of
a
course
music
there's some.
festival. So, and then there was video of this.
And they
then,
claim that it was racism.
yeah, it kind of went viral a
Mm-hmm.
few weeks
Mm-hmm.
ago. And yeah, so a lot of people are kind of upset about Crush. And afterwards he apologized and he said, it was a misunderstanding. I was just trying to ensure the safety of everybody because people were like pushing up front. So he's like, well, let me just not touch everybody's hand because they're going to crowd each other. So let me just step back.
Okay.
So he was trying to say it was a safety issue, but
Right.
some people
Some people didn't buy that.
didn't want to hear that.
Yeah. Well, this is the first I've ever heard of Crush. And this is the last I'll ever speak of him. But I don't know him. I don't know. I saw the video of it. It wasn't conclusive.
Right.
If I had to convict him of a crime, I wouldn't convict him because it's just not conclusive.
Yeah, it was hard to tell.
It's hard to tell what he's doing. Like he
the-
doesn't touch all the hands, but you never touch all the hands.
Yeah.
It could be an unfortunate coincidence. His explanation could be true. It could also not be true. Maybe he just doesn't want to touch black hands. That's totally possible. I'm not going to die on that hill. Again, I don't know him. It's possible he was intentionally avoiding those hands. I would tend to think he wasn't because who even cares?
Yeah, I mean, hands are hands.
Hands are hands. Are you really that upset about touching a black hand? And during a concert, are you thinking about that consciously? It just seems unlikely, even for a person who's actually racist.
Right.
Yeah, even if he were actually racist, I just don't think that he would consciously make this sort of decision while during a concert. He would accidentally touch black hands just because he's in the midst of he has other things he's thinking about,
Yeah.
right? And that's not even saying he's not racist. I'm just saying even an actual racist person probably would just not devote too much mental energy to this topic.
Yeah.
So I don't think that's good evidence that he's racist. Although I did look up, and I looked this up on Twitter. And by the way, it's so awesome. I've not been talking about K-pop for a while, but it seems like there's always just some kind of race thing. I don't know why. Why is it always there's some kind of race thing in K-pop? Just fine. I'm used to talking about it. I talk about politics a lot. But why would he be this invested about not touching black hands? I don't understand.
Right.
Who cares? Even if you are racist, who cares? And another thing, wouldn't you just touch them just in case you don't want to get I know, let's just put it this way. I do know people that I strongly suspect are racist. They actually actively try to do things that cover that.
Yeah, to avoid looking racist.
Right, exactly. Those people are often the most concerned with avoiding things that look racist. Okay? I'm just going to tell you straight up. Those people are often the most concerned with avoiding the appearance of being racist. Whereas the people who are not racist are often the least concerned and the most prone to doing things that unfortunately look racist. Mm-hmm. There is context, though. I saw somebody post, like, he was on Masked Singer and he wore like a blackface mask, which they consider automatically racist. I don't, but if you do, that's fair. That's okay. And so if you want to create a narrative, if you don't want to enter that into the body of evidence against him, that's fine. That's fine. I don't know whether or not this was intentional on his part, whether or not he's racist. I'm not going to die on this hill because I never even heard of him until recently.
Yeah, I hadn't heard of him until he did a song with J-Hope, and I was like, oh, okay, this is a rapper.
What I will say, though, is that why even spend energy on this? Who cares? This minor artist that you've never heard about, who even cares? I just don't know why. I just can't get worked up about this. I don't know why people. They're just seeking to be outraged, I guess.
Yeah, I just think a lot of the racism issues that come up, it's like it's so unintentional by the Korean artists. They're not even. If they hated black people, we would know. They're not doing just incidental things that are like, oh, that showed that you're racist.
Well, I don't know that we would know. They might hide it well enough. And I'll revise that. I can see why you might just be outraged and care about things. That's fine. I do that sometimes too. I just sort of look for outrage bait. But Here's what I would say. Since we seem to be talking about this issue so often, how anti-black, how unwelcoming to black people K-pop is, and when you read the New York Times article, it will say things such as, "This is a problem. This has been a problem in K-pop," and it will cite other things that have happened. Right? It will talk about Red Velvet and things like that. This is a thing. K-pop has a historical problem with its relationship to black. Okay, fine. I won't even argue with you about that. Let's just assume for a second that that's true. There's a historical problem. There's a problem with the way they treat black people, the relationship they have with, even though they use black music as inspiration, all of that. Let's just say it's true for a moment. My question is, why are you even still listening to this stuff? Maybe it's just time for you to stop listening to it. Why are you still listening to it? Why are you still investing energy into it? Why are you making podcasts about it if you have such a problem with their relationship, with their stance on race? Why not just disavow yourself of all of it and move on to other types of music, to other things that you could be invested in? Because clearly this is not the space for you. Clearly it's just filled with a bunch of insensitive Korean people. Most of them are racist, blah, blah, blah.
Right. If everything you believe about them is true, then how come you're
for the sake of argument, let's say all of it is true. There are places that I don't enjoy being in that are not healthy for me to interact with. And the vast majority of the time, what happens is I just limit my interaction with those spaces. I'm not telling anybody to leave, but I'm just telling you that maybe it's better for your mental health to reassess how much energy you devote to it, how much you care about what happens in it. It's one genre of music. There's tons of music you can listen to. There's tons of artists you can listen to.
Yeah. And I do think in all the years we've talked about stories like this where there's cultural appropriation or accused racism, it does seem like there's less of a cancellation now. It's a story, but it's not this guy's canceled and he's not going to be seen for a year or whatever. I feel like people are kind of okay, something happened. It's maybe a story, maybe not, but it's not.
They never got canceled, did they? I mean, not in Korea. Red Velvet and BTS never got canceled.
No,
obviously.
But I feel like there was a lot more talk about it, a lot more anger.
And maybe that indicates a lot of people who used to care deeply about it, they've just moved on, which I think it's healthier for them.
Yeah.
Because a lot of these artists, they keep doing what they do, whether you think it's problematic, whether you think it's defensible, whether you think, whatever you think about it, they seem to continue to do it, right? These Korean artists they just have different values, or they don't care about yours, or they're insensitive to what you need or want. Nothing is changing.
Well, I did like how Crush said, this is a misunderstanding. This is what was going through my mind at the time. It was a safety thing. He just explained what was his point of view. He didn't immediately apologize and say, "I'm sorry." And
no, he didn't apologize. That's good.
Yeah, I don't think people should apologize if they don't think they did anything wrong, and just to appease the vocal people that are complaining. So I'm glad that he was just able to here's my point of view of what happened. Thank you to our guest, Morgan. You can listen to BTS Happy Hour on Samsung Podcasts, Apple Podcasts, Amazon Music, Spotify, and other podcast platforms, or visit btshappyhour.com. If you like the show, please take a moment to rate us on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. Follow us on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, and Weverse. Check out the merch store with BTS theme, tees, hoodies, and more, linked in the description, as well as on the BTS Happy Hour Facebook page. Until next time, this has been the BTS Happy Hour. Thanks for listening, and remember, make every hour a happy one.